the Instagram account that shattered a California high school. It had barely a dozen followers, but the discovery of its racist post turned a Bay Area community against itself and changed students' lives forever. What's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name's Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. The reason I'm covering this story is for two reasons. Number one, I'm an educator. I'm an English teacher. I take my job very seriously in education, and I value education. I'm even going back to school myself because that's how much I love education. And boy, tuition fees are expensive, which is why I'm grinding it out on YouTube. But I think it's important for us educators to guide that next generation over these hurdles related to struggles of growing up, especially in a white supremacist world or a white supremacist nation like America. So we have to help young people overcome those challenges. I dealt with them as a young person, and it breaks my heart to hear young people still go through those types of struggles. The second reason I'm covering this story is because I think it touches on a topic or a point that I've made several times in previous videos. The next generation, the younger generation, will not inherently become less racist or non-racist just because they are not from the older generation. Nobody would say communism does not still exist because the old communists are dying. Nobody would say that religious radicalism or extremism of any religion will not still exist in younger people just because the old religious extremists are dying. The same thing applies to racism and white supremacy. Nobody should say the younger people cannot be racist just because the old racists are dying. No, in fact, what we're seeing is the opposite. If you look on 4chan or several parts of the internet, for example, my YouTube comment section, all you'll see are young people typing the most evil, racist things you've ever heard. You go onto Xbox Live back in the day, all you were hearing were young people playing video games who were mostly white men saying the N-word to everybody, and especially harassing black players on video games. And then thirdly, when we look at all these mass shootings we've been having in the US that have been racially motivated, when we look at Buffalo, when we look at Jacksonville, when we look at South Carolina, these were young white men, younger than me. I'm 33 years old. So these kids were influenced by TV and all sorts of media that we consume that's supposed to be colorblind and post-racial, yet and still these young white men are incensed, entrenched in hatred, a lot of them. I'm not saying all white men are like this, but what I'm saying is that this ideology, white supremacy, is continuing to morph and evolve and be passed down to the next generation like a tiki torch. So let's read this story right here. I'm going to jump into it. It was written by Dashka Slater, published on August 17th, 2023 for the New York Times. Earlier this summer, Melissa Fole, an elementary school principal in Albany, California, was sitting cross-legged on a friend's couch, drinking coffee and scrolling through the emails that had accumulated while she was on a brief end-of-the-school year vacation, when she opened a message from her school's district superintendent. It was short and to the point. On June 20th, the U.S. Supreme Court had declined to hear the last remaining appeal from the last remaining lawsuit stemming from an Instagram account that convulsed Albany High School in 2017. When the account was discovered, Fole was in her first year as a high school assistant principal after spending a decade teaching elementary school. A biracial Asian and white woman with wavy silver hair, expressive brown eyes, and a silver hoop in one nostril, she had known many of the students embroiled in the Instagram account since they were in third grade and had been personally named in some of the ensuing lawsuits. Now she put down her coffee and began to cry. It was a huge relief that this whole thing is done, she says. Shout out to the Bay Area. I went to Berkeley many years ago. Bay Area is very dope. My favorite part of California. Very walkable, very livable, very green. Not like Southern California. Also, it seems like everybody in the Bay Area is mixed. I don't think there's that was a joke. I'm just joking. But come on. Anyway, let's get back into the text. All right. Done and yet also not done. Because Albany, a liberal, affluent town of around 20,000 people in the Bay Area, is still struggling with the aftermath. It was a private Instagram account with barely more than a dozen followers. Few people saw it when it was live, yet its discovery derailed lives, shredded relationships, and caused families to flee both the town and its public schools. What happened in Albany happened online, but the repercussions played out everywhere people gathered, in homes and classrooms, at supermarkets and on sports fields, on Facebook and next door. I never heard of this story, and I didn't read this story ahead of time. A lot of the times when I read these texts, I did not read it before, so I'm reacting live to the text with you guys. And I find this highly interesting because how could one Instagram account cause people to leave some beautiful Bay Area suburb? I mean, come on. I mean, I really want to know what was on this account. Let's go. Part of the injury was to the town's self-regard. Albany is so tiny that people who live there call it Smallbany, bordered by Berkeley to the south and east, by the gray-blue waters of San Francisco Bay to the west, and by El Cerrito to the north. Albany is just under 2 square miles. It isn't one of those fancy suburbs with gated communities and sprawling McMansions. It feels like a funky little backwater. The homes are mostly stucco bungalows or shingled with wood, the yards and porches festooned with rainbow flags and Black Lives Matter signs. Sounds a little bit like how I grew up in Monroe, Louisiana. Like in my neighborhood, we didn't have mega McMansions. Yes, a lot of the homes were kind of copy and paste, but growing up in Monroe, like we have different architectural types, feels like a small community and that sort of stuff. And that's usually like not what I think about with California. I think about these large sprawling suburbs in like like with like Levittown sort of thing. And then in the cities, you get like apartments and funky little neighborhoods with different homes. Very interesting to hear that that's this type of neighborhood in Albany. Really want to go back to the Bay Area one day. Let's get back into the story. Almost half the residents are white, and more than a quarter are Asian. 13% are Latino. You could call it diverse, and you probably do if you're white. But it doesn't feel as diverse to Black residents, who make up just over 4% of the population. It isn't that diverse economically either. Median household income is above 113,000 US dollars. Nationally, the figure is about $70,000. Parents shoehorn themselves into Albany's modest dwellings for one key reason: the schools. If you're one of Albany's roughly 1,200 high school students, you know you're lucky to be there. That's one reason the Instagram account was so painful. The schools, 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 1 traditional 4-year high school, are what bind Albany together. After the account's discovery, they were also what wedged it apart. The divisions remain in place. Schools are a big reason parents choose neighborhoods, and a part of me really likes Budapest because they have some good schools here, even the public schools. I taught at a public school here briefly, like as a substitute, as a part of a school that I'm volunteering with here in Budapest, and it was very nice, and it was very clean. The students were very respectful, and that was a public school. I was very taken aback. It was on the it was on the Buddha side, which is the rich part of the city. But still, I was like, okay, maybe I could see myself living here, because definitely as a parent, I would want my kids to get the best education possible. Let's continue in the story. At the town's middle school graduation in June, parents whose children had been on opposite sides of the chasm, opened by the account, sat 2 rows apart from one another and didn't speak. At the high school, where disciplinary policies and much of the curriculum have been revamped in the account's wake, teachers deployed competing narratives about how exactly the events should be interpreted, with some seeing them as a calamity that occurred despite Albany's particular virtues: small, liberal, educated, interconnected, and others as a consequence of Albany's particular shortcomings: too white, too insular, too wealthy, too obsessed with academic achievement. All right. The questions that the account raised about fighting bigotry, about the impacts on social media, and about the best way to respond when young people in your community fail so utterly to live up to the values you thought you shared had no simple answer. Whatever you believed about Albany, about America, about teenagers, racism, sexism, social media, punishment, and the public discourse on each of these topics, the story of the Instagram account could be marshaled as evidence. It was the incident that explained everything and yet also the incident that couldn't be explained. But I have tried. I spent more than 5 years reporting on what happened, conducting hundreds of hours of interviews, and reviewing thousands of pages of legal documents, as well as police reports, social media posts, letters, diaries, photographs, text messages, videos, and public testimony. I would say get a life, but I'm glad that you wrote this story to give me content here. But I'm really, really interested on what's in this Instagram account. What caused such a big hullabaloo? What caused people to get so turned up off of one kid's Instagram? Or was it multiple kids' Instagrams? Let's find out. It's like the event that tore apart our city, says Kim Trutain, who was on the school board at the time and now works as the district spokeswoman. More than that, it kind of ripped our hearts because everyone was just like, how could this have happened? How could such a hurtful and damaging thing have happened in Albany? You know, there's all this outcry and outrage about this Instagram account. But do people do this about the next school shooting? Did they do that about the last school shooting? No. Like, Americans are very weird. We're very weird people. We'll get more upset about a kid having a racist Instagram more than the nearly yearly ritual of our children being sacrificed to the God gun. Like, we'll never get over that, right? We're always going to be upset that kids are posting mean and nasty things on social media, but not about our kids getting shot at school. Whatever. Continuing here. So, for A, it all started a little before 11 a.m. on March 20th, 2017. A junior at Albany High School, she had just left her third period culinary arts class when she was met by a group of girls, most of them black. Okay, we've got to tell you something, one of them said. Like, we have to tell you. A waited impatiently. It was probably just some kind of boy drama, but it wasn't. Not the kind of boy drama she was expecting anyway. There's a racist Instagram account, the girls told her. A bunch of people are following it, and there are pictures of you on it. Wow. Everyone at school, it seemed, had at least 2 Instagram accounts. The curated one that your relatives and people from other schools could see, and a more informal spam or Finsta account for posting memes. Is that what the kids call it? Finsta? What's a Finsta? I've never heard of that phrase before. A fake Instagram, I guess. Thank you for having a Gen Z wife. I'm so lucky that my wife is a Zoomer. She can put me in. Anyway, Finsta account for posting memes, rants, and candids for your inner circle. But this account was something else. All right, cool little graphic they got here. But we got to get rid of AI art in news articles. Please don't start doing this. Illustrations by Paula Manelli. Okay, so it's not AI art. But I don't want to see that in the New York Times, ever. Don't do that. All right, 2 of the girls in the hallway, one of them black and one Asian, were the ones who had seen it. Over the weekend, they had been hanging out with one of their close friends, a biracial white and Mexican boy whose nickname was Murphy. See, I told you everyone in the Bay Area was mixed. I told you. More proof shall be disposed here. More proof shall be given. Anyway, because they were minors at the time, all the young people in this article are referred to by their initials, middle names, or nicknames. Murphy and the 2 girls had gone to see the movie Get Out, and afterwards, he had shown them a private account created by another friend, a Korean American boy whose middle name was Charles. It featured memes about black girls' hair, about slavery, about lynching. Let's break this down. Korean American boy, little Asian boy, making racist jokes about black people. Now, what have black people ever done to Korean people? Aside from black people, black men being conscripted to go and fight in Korea against the communists that tried to take over their entire nation, you know, some people, depending on what your allegiances are, if you like North Korea, but very few people do, what have black men ever done to the Korean people? We didn't bomb them. We didn't kill their people. We didn't R-word their women. We didn't do anything to that. Yet and still, what do many of the immigrants do when they come to America? Whether they be Asian, whether they be Arab, whether they be European, whether they be Latin American, they buy into anti-black racism and continue to perpetuate anti-black racism. Absolutely not cool, because we didn't do anything to anybody. Black Americans have been on the forefront of advocating for every other group of people on the planet whenever they have a struggle, whenever they have a fight, whenever they're going against the white supremacist American government that's totalitarian across the world, hell-bent on destroying their nations and their freedom and their civilization. Black Americans have been the one that said, we're not going to fight in Vietnam. We're not going to go fight in Iraq. We're not going to join your evil military. We're the ones who are always doing that. Yet and still, when the Koreans lose half of their nation and have to get on dinghies and boats across the Pacific and beg to be let into the white man's nation, what do they do when they land? Make racist Instagram accounts, harass us when we go into their nasty Korean hair stores, all this sort of stuff. Yet and still, what do? We want open borders, right? Kick them out. Anyway, most of the girls gathering around A were in tears. They had known Charles and many of the account's 13 followers for years. A multiracial group of extended friends, they had slept over at one another's houses, hung out together in class and at lunch, lounged around after school watching movies. Several of them were even planning to go to prom together. A was the only one of the girls who wasn't surprised. She slammed her fist into a wall. I should have listened to my mom, she thought. I should have done something to prevent this. A remembers feeling out of place in Albany from the time she transferred into the school district in the third grade, and the feeling intensified when she went to high school. She had a black father and a white mother. I told you, everyone in the Bay Area is mixed. She had a black father and a white mother, and it seemed clear to her that she wasn't the kind of girl that Albany boys liked. They don't like bad broads. I'm continuing here. Those girls wore Lululemon leggings, tossed their long straight hair over their shoulders, laughed when boys teased them or put them down. Those girls were smart enough to get into a good college, but not outwardly so smart that they made people uncomfortable. A was never going to be one of them. It wasn't just her brown skin or her curly hair or her low voice. It was something in the way she held herself. Her friends described her as strong, funny, sarcastic, and straightforward, but beneath the confident exterior, she was on shaky ground. Her father had died suddenly just before she started high school, and she had been struggling with depression ever since. The problem with Charles and his friends had started a couple of months before. She was in algebra 2, deep in her own thoughts, when she felt a hand in her hair. It belonged to a white boy she sort of knew. They had friends in common. She swatted the hand away. Being pawed like this wasn't unusual. Whenever she changed her hairstyle, someone's hands would be in it. She wasn't about to make a big deal about it. It was the middle of class, and anyway, if she got into it with everyone who tried to touch her hair, she would be exhausted. Now, on one hand, I can understand a young man, trying to flirt with a girl by, touching her hair, pulling her hair, stuff like that. That's what we did in like elementary school, middle school, stuff like that. Not in high school. Not when you're taking algebra 2. You should have developed a mouthpiece and game at that point where you can pass a note. You should have got that note out, boy. What are you doing? Don't be pulling girls' hair. Don't be seeing bad little mixed broads in your algebra 2 class and you decide to pull on their hair. That will not get you the goods. That's not going to get you the goods. See, I should be a game coach. I should be a game coach for young men, to help them get their first girlfriends or whatever, or find that prom date. But that's an industry that is not ready yet. Anyway, I can understand that on one hand, boys trying to flirt that way. But then on the other hand, it's absolutely not cool to touch black people's hair. Thank God I'm bald. Thank God I'm bald. And all the white countries that I've been to, I've dealt with a ton of racism. But at least nobody ever tried to touch my golden 4C hair. Though I wish I had it back. Might go back to Turkey once I get bald and rich and get that Akon hairline. Let's continue here in the story. All right, then a friend showed her a video of the entire interaction that Charles had posted on his Finsta. He had captioned it, "Touching the Nap." Oh, God. All right. So Charles is hella racist. He touched this black girl's hair. He wasn't trying to flirt. He wasn't trying to get the goods. He wasn't trying to, get his Mac on. He wanted to do something for his stupid Instagram, stupid Finstagram, entitled the video that he posted, "Touching the Nap." Nasty. Nasty, Charles. Charles, you will die a virgin. Anyway, she confronted Charles on Snapchat, and after some back and forth, he deleted the video. But a few days later, she heard that Charles had posted another classroom photo of her on the same account. This one just showed the back of her head, her bun, her ear, the hood of her sweatshirt. The caption asked whether the photo was of her or another black girl in the junior class, as if they were impossible to tell apart. See, on one hand, the white supremacists, are not clever because they've been making this same argument that all black people look alike. They've been making this same joke since the 70s. They're not able to update their stereotypes because consistently, whenever white supremacists put stereotypes on us, we consistently prove them wrong. Or we prove that their stereotypes are actually admissions of their own stupidity and how they actually act. So they like to say that black people have no class, black people are bad at education, or they're not at school to actually learn. Yet and still, what is Charles doing while in class? This black girl is paying attention to her lesson, studying Algebra 2 with all of her might and wit, a class I hated, by the way. And here is Charles in the back of class, obsessively videotaping this young girl. Thank God I am not the father of this woman, because I would have gone to school and shaken Charles by his little 14-year-old shoulders until he collapsed. But 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 there are better men than me. There are better men than me. I'm going to continue here. This time, she confronted Charles in person and made him delete it. Don't post anything else, she told him. We are not cool. Don't talk about me. Honestly, she should have snitched and went to the principal and said, this little boy is harassing me. He's a stalker. He's an incel. He's a loser. Get him out of class. Kick him out of school. Suspend him. Anyway, but the feeling of being watched lingered. It made it hard to go to school. Eventually, at her mother's urging, she talked to Melissa Fole, then assistant principal, about what had happened, but she insisted that she didn't want the school to take any action. I didn't want more repercussions, A told me during one of many interviews over the ensuing years. All right, interesting. So this black girl doesn't have her black father in the family in the family anymore because he passed away. The mother goes to school with the black daughter, and the mother is white, and she's like, you need to, take care of this situation, but we don't want any repercussions. All right. For all the white women out there who have kids with black men or plan to have kids with black men, you need to be very protective of your black children because, I have to say this. Don't let people make you think that this is just, kids being kids, boys being boys, whatever, high school drama that does not need to be taken seriously, because the racism that young people go through, especially young black people, and yes, I am including biracial black people as black, the racism we go through lasts with us our entire lives. And that sort of hurt and pain can detriment somebody in a way that you'll never know. Hell, I might be poor right now because of all the racism I went through. No, definitely I am. But anyway, we have to protect our children, especially if you have black children. And so for all the white people with mixed kids, especially if they're half black, please protect them at school and make sure that anybody who is racially harassing your kids gets the utmost punishment. Because number one, you have to show your children that you actually protect them from the evil in this world, especially an evil that's very specific to their lives. And also you have to show that there is a way for racism to be punished, because you might teach this little black girl or black boy who's half black or fully black, whatever, that, racism, there's nothing that can be done about it, right? People can do whatever they want to you as a black person, and you're just at the mercy of them. There's no system to protect you. There's no way to seek recourse for your grievances. But that's not what we want to teach our kids. What we want to teach our kids is that there is a civil way to handle things, and that if you are being racially harassed, there is a way to vent that grievance in a way where the perpetrator of it is punished and also justice will be served. That's what I have to say about that. And I think that's a very important message out there. So let's go here. So A told me one of the many interviews over the ensuing years that she didn't want repercussions for the perpetrator of the racism against her. All right. Fole remembers wanting to respect the autonomy of a teenager who says she preferred to handle the situation on her own because the people involved were part of her social circle. While it seemed like a messed up thing, Fole says now, I didn't know if it was forecasting anything at the time. I sure wish I would have. All right. By noon, the girls' distress had attracted the attention of the school's administration. Fole and the school's other assistant principal, Tammy Bonneau, ushered them into a conference room. Everyone was talking at once. Many were crying. The chaos made it hard to piece together a narrative. Eventually, Bonneau went to interview Murphy, the boy who revealed the existence of the account, while Fole distributed photocopied forms for recording student complaints. Only a couple of them had seen the account firsthand, but now the others remembered the questionable comments and racist jokes they had shrugged off in the past. Everything looked different today. The problem was they didn't have any evidence. Already, the 10 or so girls in the conference room were starting to feel hopeless. It would be their word against the boys, and then everything would go on as normal. Still, they wrote down what they could on the forums. Private Instagram account of disgusting racist images about multiple black girls in my grade, making my very close friends bawl their eyes out and have fits of rage. I've heard multiple racist comments made to my friends. This also affects me because I am a black girl, already am self-conscious of myself. This is heartbreaking to hear. This is absolutely heartbreaking to hear, and it needs to be so important for school administrators, educators, everybody to make sure that black children in our public schools in America are protected. Also black children everywhere, but especially black children in our public schools, where so many of the parents of these other children who are not black are teaching racism in the home to their kids, whether they want to admit it or not, whether they are, whether they view what they say as racist or not. A lot of the times this racism is being passed down to this next generation of non-black people in the world. And they are reflecting that when they go into the public sphere, especially public school. The first time I was ever called nigger, it was in elementary school by another little white kid who didn't want to play with me because I was black. I swear to God, the month before, we were playing all the time. Then I come up to this group of white kids that I was playing with in elementary school, and they say, we don't want to play with you. Then the other one walks away, and behind his, while thinking that I can't hear him, he turns around and say, nigger, to me. And didn't say anything about it. Stuck with me all my life. Never told that story here on this platform before. But these sort of things happen to children, and it sticks with them forever. And we need to protect our black children in schools. Going here. So one girl, Carrie, a version of her nickname, hadn't gone into the conference room. She was close friends with both A and Charles, the daughter of immigrants from Thailand. She was known for being such a good sport that her friends teased her constantly, particularly about her refusal to say anything bad about anyone. Now she was thinking about how she could get copies of what the other girls had seen on Murphy's phone. As she walked to her fifth period class, she pulled out her phone and found the Instagram account the girls had been talking about. It was private, so she couldn't see the post, but the app listed the people she followed who also followed it. One name stood out: a boy of mixed Asian, white, and Latino descent. I told you everybody in the Bay is mixed. Y'all take a shot every time I say that. It's going to come up consistently. A boy of mixed Asian, white, and Latino descent who would later be identified in litigation as John Doe. Carrie hardly knew him. They had spoken only once or twice, but there were mutuals on Instagram, and another friend of hers, Rosie, a version of her middle name, had dated him briefly. Both of them were in psychology, her next class. They're taking psychology classes in high school? See, the Bay Area got it going on. That's crazy. I only took one psychology class, and that was in university, abnormal psychology. Shout out to Anna Crapazano, great professor. Smoking. Anyway, when she walked into the classroom, she asked Rosie to borrow Doe's phone and then meet her in the restroom. Doe and Rosie have different memories of what Rosie said when she approached him. Rosie, who is white, says she asked him straight up, Carrie says there's this weird racist Instagram account you're following. Can I look at your phone? Doe remembers her offering a made-up excuse, something like, hey, my phone just died and I need to call my parents. They agreed that he unlocked his phone and handed it to her. Minutes later, Carrie and Rosie were standing in the middle of the girls' bathroom, their heads bent over the borrowed phone. Carrie took pictures of the screen with her own phone as Rosie scrolled through the account. Some of the posts were the kinds of things you might see on any other high schooler's account. Memes, guys roasting each other, the regular kind of dumb. But the rest were shocking. A half dozen posts mocking different whites and Asian girls at the school for their weight or other aspects of their appearance. Worst of all was the overt, unfiltered racism, anti-black racism, black men being lynched or beaten, jokes about the Ku Klux Klan, and racist slurs. A screenshot of the Snapchat conversation between Charles and A about the hair-touching video that was captioned, "Holy expletive, I'm on the edge of bringing my rope to school on Monday." Well, see, this is a kid who could possibly be a violent racist, and he needs to be expelled, period. Once you find out who made this sort of content on Instagram or whatever, yes, he can be redeemed. Yes, he can be re-educated. Yes, he could be reformed. But when you're talking about bringing rope to school and threatening violence against other students, harassing black girls in class by pulling on their hair and making jokes about it online, you don't need to be at our institution. Yet and still, what would happen at most American schools? He would get to stay, and my black ass, who refused to say the Pledge of Allegiance, gets suspended for 3 days. Of course, this is America, baby. Anyway, a photo of another black girl and her black basketball coach with a noose drawn around each of their necks, and the caption, "Twinning is winning." Absolutely gross. Absolutely gross. And it's not even funny. It was so much worse than I anticipated, Carrie says. I didn't think I would react that badly, but I was physically shaking. They didn't have much time. If they were gone for long, their teacher would notice. Rosie scrolled, Carrie photographed. She took pictures of the most offensive posts, roughly 2 dozen, about half of the total. She took pictures of the comments and the list of followers. Then she sent them via airdrop to Fole and some of the girls. As A sat in the conference room, going through the images, she had trouble taking in what she saw. Then she saw a familiar photo. It had been lifted from her own Instagram account, her favorite picture from a trip to Lake Tahoe with her best friends. It had been paired with a photo of a gorilla, of course. I just got this stomach feeling of like, wow, basically anything I do is not going to be good enough for these people. A told me, I can't even take a picture of myself in the snow looking how I look and post it on Instagram. Once again, this goes to show that white supremacists, racists, they will never be satisfied. When black people are just living our normal lives, visiting Lake Tahoe, wearing suits, being educationally excellent, working our jobs, there is nothing we can do to be the paragons of excellence in the eyes of people who naturally hate us, which is quite a lot of people. So what should we do? How should we react to a world that is hostile to our life and our expression, even when we are neutral? We should turn the F up and do whatever we want. Period. Period. Sag your pants, wear a suit, wear weaves, wear wigs, wear afros, wear dreads, date white women, marry a white man, go to Asia, live in Bhutan, live in France, travel through Latin America, do whatever you want to do, because nothing we will do will ever stop them from comparing us to gorillas, monkeys, and apes. Nothing we will ever do, no matter how many degrees we get or how many vials of crack we sell, how rich we get, how poor we are, nothing will ever make them stop hating us. So just do whatever you want to do. I want to make that point clear. I feel very good right now because I'm getting out all the talking points that are very important just in this one article. But it's still very sad that this long article is written on the New York Times about a stupid Instagram account. Meanwhile, very certainly in 2024, this year, we will have another mass shooting where multiple high school students will die. This is an absolute fact. This is my prediction for 2024. Negro Damas reporting in, and the weather forecast says dead babies falling from the sky. More at 7, Tom. All right. That night, Charles, sobbing, called his sister, who was away at college. She wasn't that alarmed at first because he had called her in tears plenty of times, usually after getting into a fight with their mother, who had divorced their father a few years earlier. Compared with his sister, who had been both an academic and an athletic superstar in high school, Charles was a kind of a slacker, smart enough to take advanced courses like AP Computer Science and AP Physics, but not motivated enough to get better than B's and C's. He had a close group of male friends that he had hung out with since middle school or even earlier, most of them white or Asian, and he also was tight with a couple of groups of black and Asian girls. With the girls, he tended to let his guard down more, allowing them to glimpse the depression that had dogged him since the collapse of his parents' marriage. Why are they making him a sympathetic character? I don't give a F about Charles's parents' divorce. I don't care about his depression. I don't care about any of that, because none of this is an excuse to be racist. None of this is an excuse to be hateful. I've been depressed. I've been sad. My parents had many, many problems. I never made that an excuse to be hateful. I'm black in a white supremacist world, and I don't hate white people. Yet and still, they're making this half-white kid have some sort of sympathy in this article. Who cares? Who cares? Of course, they're going to flesh out the background of these characters because telling the story, we need to add layers and complexity to this, complicated tale of coming of age in racist America. Of course, we need to add layers to the story. But who cares? I'm letting you know exactly right now. I don't care about any of that because, Charles, none of that is an excuse to be hateful. None of this is an excuse to be ignorant. None of this is an excuse to be a bigot. If that's the case, why are we hounding Kanye West? Kanye West got mad mental problems, and he's been hella canceled. He's been hella canceled. That's not an excuse to hate on Jewish people, white people, black people, anybody. Your mental health problems, your parents' divorce, get over it. Get over it. Y'all tell us all the time, get over it. Y'all tell us all the time, get over slavery, get over Jim Crow. Y'all get over yourselves. Get over yourselves. All right, I'm going to continue here. His stepfather, Charles's stepfather, racist Charles's stepfather, who is white, would send him emails brimming with spiritual advice. Depression is one bad habit you cannot afford, he wrote in one. You may have every reason to be depressed, but accepting those reasons will only deepen your depression. Do not give in to the dark side. Choose not to be depressed. Okay. This time, however, Charles wasn't calling to complain about the usual family conflicts, which were often about his mother's frustration with his passivity, his lack of drive, the amount of time he spent playing video games. It's really bad, Charles told his sister. I did something really bad. It took him a long time to tell her what. We're going to figure this out, she assured him when he finally choked out a description of the Instagram account. She suggested he start by taking responsibility. He remembers writing his apology with her on the phone, the two of them editing it together. He posted it on Instagram that night. I completely betrayed people who considered me a friend, and I cannot even begin to explain how disgusting I feel. All things that were portrayed on the account do not actually portray my true feelings about people of color. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. My mother always told me what you do in the dark is who you are in the light, and everybody gets revealed eventually. What you do in the dark is who you truly are. And when you had your small little Instagram account with your 12 little followers, stalking girls at school, pulling on black girls' hair, drawing nooses on people, comparing black people to gorillas when they're just living their life, that's who you truly are. Now, can you be reformed? Can you be changed? Yes, but don't try to lie about who you are. Say this instead. I was an idiot. I know racism is stupid, and I will try to be better. Because honestly, I don't want to be embarrassed. If it wasn't for the public shaming, he would not even be saying sorry. Let's be absolutely real. I'm going to continue here. I want to be someone with integrity, someone who cares about all people and someone who people can trust. I have not lived up to that at all. There's no way for me to rationalize why I did what I did. It was all just my stupid judgment of what would entertain my friends. I cannot express enough that no one but me deserves any hostility or consequences. I don't expect forgiveness because my actions are unforgivable. Thank you. Well, you will be unforgiven then. All right. Then, exhausted from crying, he fell asleep. Oh, all right. The account had started at a chain restaurant called The Melt that was known for its grilled cheese sandwiches. There's a whole business just selling grilled cheese sandwiches, and here I am broke. All right. Charles was sitting in a booth with three friends, two of them the children of first-generation immigrants from China, and the third a white boy who carried the cachet of also being friends with the high school's popular kids. It was a winter weekend day sometime late in 2016 or maybe early in 2017. And the four boys, as they later explained in interviews and court documents, were doing what they always did when they were together, trying to make one another laugh. As they waited for their food, Charles scrolled through pictures on his phones, memes he had made, photos he had saved for future memes. His model was the stuff he saw online in YouTube videos and subreddits, material that seemed funny precisely because it was offensive. Charles didn't think too deeply about the morality of that kind of thing. What mattered was that these memes made his friends laugh. So let's break this down right now. What you're noticing in the article here is that a lot of the Asian students, a lot of the Asian people in America specifically choose to hang around white folks, right? Because a lot of immigrants come to America and they're told that white is right and being close to positions of power, chase the American dream, and who better embodies the American dream than the descendants of people who came to a land and slaughtered their inhabitants and enslaved people. Yes, that's the American dream. So let's try to be like them, right? So all the Asians are hanging around the white folks, picking up on white culture. I'll never forget when I once went to a nail salon in Monroe, Louisiana to get a pedicure because says every man should get pedicures. I walk in there. Of course, it's nothing but Asian people doing the pedicures and stuff. And what do they have on TV? What do they have on TV? Blasting the entire time I'm on there? Fox News. Fox News in this Asian salon. Not a white person in sight other than the people who are getting their nails done. And these Asian people are just consuming all this stupid propaganda that comes from Fox News. That goes to show that, a lot of people that come to the U.S., especially the Asian community, they're picking up on the anti-black racism from the godfathers of anti-black racism, which is the, how can I say this? The Caucasian community, the collection of Caucasians who dominate the nation, right? And so they are picking up on that. And what do white folks do when they're all alone? What do white folks do when they're all alone? Drop N-words, say negative racist stuff about every other group of people, say their true feelings. And so the Asians, who are just welcome enough, who can slide in a little bit because the white supremacists treat them as like honorary Aryans and that sort of stuff, they pick up on that. And so they're trying to participate and outdo the white supremacists in their own game, which is make jokes at the expense of black people. Now, some people will also say, well, these are just jokes. It's just comedy. You should get over it and that sort of stuff. These jokes lead to violence. These jokes lead to people posting these memes, which then go on these accounts that are ended up online that anybody can access. And a lot of young white people are reading this sort of content because they're getting these jokes along with these fake memes and statistics that say that black people are violent, that America will be better if there were no minorities, around blacks never relax, all this sort of stuff that you can find all over the internet. Go look at my comment section. Go look on 4chan. Go look on 8kun. Go look on Reddit. All this sort of stuff. You can find very, very racist material online. And what does that do to the minds of young people who are very impressionable? It causes the Jacksonvilles. It causes the Buffalo. It causes the South Carolina church shooting and many, many more that will follow in the future. And many others that I do not even have time to express right here. So these jokes are not just jokes. Everybody can make a joke about anything, but we have to be honest about the consequences and the results of these sorts of jokes. You can make edgy humor, but if you're making humor at the expense of other people based on stereotypes that are not true, that are only detrimental, I mean, let's just be real. It's very, very negative, very lowbrow, low vibrational. Don't do it. Anyway, humor was the glue of their friend group. They were the class clowns and the envelope pushers, the ones far more focused on cracking one another up in class than on whatever they were supposed to be learning. Put downs, roasts, and pranks were how they jockeyed for status. Charles showed the other boys a photo of his friend Anna, a version of her first name, wearing a little black dress and a white coat. Anna, who has a black father and a white mother, take a shot, had posted it on Instagram with the caption, "I want to go back to the old way." "Does she really though?" Charles said. When we talked about this moment more than a year later, he wasn't sure if he had made the joke more explicit. If they really went back to the old way, Anna would be enslaved. Because that's funny to white folks, right? Making jokes about slavery is funny to white folks and apparently the Asian community too. All right, so whatever he said, the others laughed. So he turned the joke into a meme, right there at the melt, stitching Anna's post to an old-fashioned engraving of a naked black man hanging from a tree while being beaten by a white man. He captioned it, "Do you really though?" You should post these somewhere, his white friend said, then suggested Charles make an Instagram account expressly for this kind of edgier content. They all said they would follow it if he did. So Charles made a new private account and called it YoungCavage, a play on Young Savage. By March, it had 14 followers, including Charles himself. The first few followers were Charles's close friends, all juniors like him. The remaining 6 weren't in Charles's inner circle. 3 were juniors he was friends with but didn't spend a ton of time with outside of school. And 3 were sophomores he knew casually because of them. He was in his Mandarin class and had introduced him to the others. 6 of the followers were white. The rest were Asian, Latino, or Middle Eastern. Yes, the collection of all the people across the world who have been so aggrieved by black people. Yes, I remember the times black people went into Asia and totally destroyed their civilizations. I remember the times black people went to the Latin American countries and raped all of their women. I remember the times in history when we went to the Middle East and totally destroyed their books, their libraries, toppled their buildings, all of that. All the people collecting on this small Instagram account to hate on the people who have oppressed them the most throughout history. Yes, Yes, it all makes sense. So, looking back, Charles traces his offensive humor to video games because if you played a single game of League of Legends online, you were almost guaranteed to hear a barrage of racist terms and homophobic slurs from the other players. In the online kingdom where the edgelords reigned, you gained citizenship by signaling approval. On Reddit forums, there were memes that he had been upvoted by a lot of people. And in 2017, a lot of those memes found humor in things that objectively weren't funny, which was a kind of the point. Racist jokes, jokes about suicide, pedophilia, rape, incest, mass shootings, the Holocaust, people with disabilities. It was easy to laugh at those things when they weren't about you. And you could prove you belonged in the kingdom by laughing even if they were. Like with all these jokes in the back of my mind, I know it's wrong, he says. It's offensive. That's part of what the humor comes from. Something about the surprise of it, something about it being transgressive, shocking, not meant to be said or even thought, which meant that the worse it was, the funnier it would be. I guess the humor just got darker and darker as I explored more of the internet. Charles said, there is a space for dark humor. I'm not saying that there couldn't be an unfunny Holocaust joke or even an unfunny slavery joke. I'm not discounting that because there is a space for dark humor. But let that humor be actually creative. Let it not be at the expense of people who are weaker or in a weaker position than you. And let not also those jokes be said in a vacuum. Because if you're bold enough to create a Holocaust joke, why don't you say it around a bunch of Jewish people? If you're bold enough to make lynching jokes or slavery jokes, be bold enough to say it around a group of black men. If you're really going to stand on your ground and say your jokes, be able to say them anywhere and don't just hide in the dark. Because when you let that fester in the dark, that's very loser behavior. That's loser behavior. You should be able to say your dark humor anywhere. And yes, humor can be expansive. It can be transgressive. It can be, slightly, edgy in that sort of sense. But it doesn't have to be at the expense of weaker people, especially when it's paired with real dialogue about racism or anti-blackness. Let's go here. Ironic racism could feel like something that just happened, hatched in the peculiar incubator of inside references, digital gags, and detached exaggeration that is Gen Z culture. Although there is evidence that white supremacists and neo-Nazi groups have actively pushed this kind of humor into the mainstream. Because Reddit has improved its enforcement abilities since 2017, much of what Charles and his friends used to see there has migrated to platforms like 9gag and iFunny and Discord, or has been transformed into videos on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. In 2017, offensive humor was pretty commonplace at Albany High School, at least among white and Asian boys. Shortly after the account was discovered, a senior wrote, "What does it all meme?" in the Albany High School newspaper. The constant exchange of offensive memes breeds a vicious competition where the jokes get increasingly more shocking until the initial jokes are no longer very outrageous, she wrote. If every time we open our social media accounts, we are met with offensive memes, it's only natural for us to get used to that type of media. Today, Charles says that if he saw the account as an outsider, he would conclude that the person who made it was filled with hate, not just because of the content of the pictures, which were bad enough, but also because he targeted specific people, including black friends. Anna, in particular, had been one of his closest friends since 8th grade. The fact that it was people that I had interactions with on a daily basis definitely made it look like I hated these people, he says, which I don't. He knows this is hard to believe and that it sounds as if he's making excuses. All the pictures are super messed up, he says. It's definitely racist. I'm not in denial about that, but the way I explain it, I feel like it still makes it seem like I am. During the period when Charles was posting racist images on his YoungCavage account, he also wrote a thoughtful essay about racism that connected the hypocrisy of the founding fathers with the failures of Reconstruction and the present-day prison system. Perhaps the essay was written just to get a good grade, or perhaps these two parts of his brain had found a way to coexist inside his skull, like neighbors who take the same elevator to side-by-side apartments in the same building, but never engage in conversation. See, now that's actually interesting and that's actually nuanced. Can somebody be actively, how can I say this, anti-racist in their messaging, in their wording, in their actions, but enjoy racist humor? I guess this sort of goes down to similar to how there are people that enjoy, pornography that deals with these sort of topics and taboos, right? You could be a woman who is a feminist who advocates for women's rights, but also be into S&M where you are the sub, and you can be really into that. Nobody's going to discount her feminism in that way. Would somebody discount somebody's anti-racist bona fides if they are an active person who says all the right things and does all the right things in the real world, but then goes online and likes to watch, BBC porn where, people are using the N word and all that sort of racist stuff? I don't know. I don't know. That's a very deep and nuanced topic. I would just say that on one hand, you can enjoy that sort of stuff and you can be into that, but it has to be private. And the problem with Charles is that he was putting this out in public, or at least in a way that was accessible to the public, even if his account was private. Once again, this is all stupid because these are kids on Instagram doing dumb stuff. And of course, white people are going to be racist behind closed doors. And of course, Asian people want to be white. So of course, they're going to try to copy the racism that white people do. So of course, this is all stupid. And nobody's talking about the bigger picture that all these kids could have died in the middle of all this because somebody could have walked into the school and aired the thing out. I just had to get that out. Oh man, this is dope. This is dope. I'm having a great time here. So, the evening of the account's discovery, John Doe, the boy whose phone Rosie had borrowed, went to see the movie Kong Skull Island with two of his closest friends, a white boy and an Asian girl who were also sophomores. In the middle of the movie, one of their phones began to buzz. Guys, the girl whispered, come on, you have to see this. Out in the lobby of the theater, she showed them. Her phone was blowing up with questions, comments, and accusations. Racist, they said. Is this your account? The same thing was happening to all three of them. It had something to do with an Instagram account they followed, YoungCavage. People seemed to think the three sophomores were intimately involved, which none of them could figure out. They barely knew Charles, who was a grade above them. The girl whose phone was blowing up was in the same Mandarin class as Charles, and he had suggested she follow the account. The other two sophomores followed it as well because the three of them did almost everything together. All right, so this is very strange. Yeah, it's very weird because who takes Mandarin classes in high school? California is on a different level. Like, these kids are taking psychology classes, Mandarin classes. I would not be surprised if this actually is where critical race theory is taught. I would not be surprised if they actually take an elective on astrophysics. Like, what is happening in California? That's insane. In Louisiana high schools, we're taking reading, writing, and arithmetic, the 3 R's. Like, this is insane. California is a next level. Anyway, the thing is, I don't use Instagram or Finstagram that I've learned today. Yes, I'm old. I would find it hard to believe that you follow an account and you don't look through their post or anything like that and not see that they're posting racist memes. I don't know. Let's find out if they have a good alibi for what they're saying here. So, none of them could remember much about what was on the account, and when they went to look, it had already been deleted. Doe was following more than 1,000 accounts, and he says it was only later when he saw photos of the post, that he realized he'd interacted with YoungCavage at all. In fact, he had liked many of the posts and commented on 2 of them. But that night at the theater, he couldn't remember much other than it seemed edgy, in the same vein as YouTubers like iDubbbz and Filthy Frank, whose accounts he followed and who were known for their provocative antics, which included everything from using racial slurs to baking cakes made of hair or vomit. It was never anything that I'd ever actively look up and peruse through or honestly thought about deeply, Doe says now. He was a default double tapper who scrolled and liked, scrolled and liked. Later he asked himself why that was. I've wondered why back then. I didn't recognize that as problematic, he says, referring to that account. Why did I entertain that? Why did I not say anything? Yeah, that is problematic for you to be scrolling on Instagram and double tapping everything. Like, what are you, like a Chinese bot? Like, these are the people China pays to, like, boost things in the algorithm. Why didn't you just say that and come out that you work for the Russians and you were double tapping everything to mess up everybody's algorithm? Like, what type of stuff is that? I don't know, man. I'm continuing here. But on March 20th, 2017, he was thinking only about how to control the damage. At 15, he was a self described social butterfly, a talented dancer and stylish dresser with a combination of sweetness and coolness that made him appealing to both teachers and peers. I was trying to save my perceived popularity and public image, he says. This was directly attacking that and me as a person. Only in California can a high school kid describe himself as a social butterfly and not get beat up. When he got home after the movie, he posted a message to the 1,200 or so followers on his main Instagram account. I did not create this account, he remembers writing. I do not condone what was posted on this account. It went on a paragraph length defense against the accusation that he was a racist. If anything, his post, which he labored over for hours, made things worse. By knowing about it and not saying anything about it, you are condoning this, someone replied. And I would agree. That night, he paced in his room, unable to sleep. It was still a child's room, the walls covered with book fair posters from elementary school. He circled the bed, a mattress on the floor so that his blind and elderly cat, 1 year older than he was, could climb in easily. His steps powered by self-loathing and anxiety. Okay, I'm going to sleep on the floor so my blind cat can cuddle with me. Only in California. He thought, what have I done? He didn't want to tell his parents, didn't want to risk their seeing him as he suddenly saw himself. I was scared that they were going to think I was racist, he says. In my self-reflection, that was a big question. Am I racist? What makes someone racist? I think what makes you racist is double tapping a post where people are getting lynched when girls at your school are being compared to gorillas and you're double tapping that. Sure, you can say that you're a serial double tapper, but when you look at that, there has to be a thought in your mind that stops your thumb from doing the automatic response. There has to be, because if there isn't, that would make you a racist. I would say. Tuesday night school board meetings usually didn't draw a big crowd, but on March 28th, 2017, 8 days after the account's discovery, every chair was taken. Some people sat on the floor, others spilled into the hallway. Less than a week earlier, KTVU, a local evening news channel, had aired a story about the Instagram account that featured partly blurred pictures of some posts and an interview with the mother of one of the black girls who had been targeted. The town was in an uproar. Seated on a curved dais beneath the city seal, the members of the school board moved through the mundane items on their agenda until it was time for public comment. Over the next 3 hours and 20 minutes, some 45 speakers shared their grief and rage, not just about what happened at Albany High School in the past week, but also about what happened over previous years and even decades. Many black and Latino speakers said they had grown up in Albany or raised children and grandchildren there and had experienced racism or sexism or bullying that went unaddressed. This stuff is part of Albany's history, and for you to say that this is some isolated incident says more about you than it does about the history of this city, one speaker charged, addressing the school board. A black Albany parent who had a daughter in second grade talked about growing up in nearby Oakland, where he said he went to at least as many funerals as birthday parties. That's why he and his family chose to raise their family in Albany, where his daughter would be safe. His voice thrummed with sorrow and fury. What is the point of working hard in school and doing the things that you have to do, and then growing up and getting a good job and making enough money to send your kids to school in a place that's great if they're going to get treated like this? Over and over, speakers advocated for the harshest possible punishment. Heads need to roll, one parent said. Somebody's got to be expelled over this. Another speaker, a student, said she hoped the account followers' lives would be ruined. And then the father, Simon Hill, stood up and said, "Let me find Charles. Let me shake that little boy by his little 14-year-old shoulders until his head rolls off." Yeah, Simon said that, and he was quickly removed from the parent-teacher conference meeting. About 2 hours into the meeting, Anna's father stepped up to the lectern. He had first moved to Albany while getting his mechanical engineering degree at UC Berkeley and had an air of authority that had quickly established him as a spokesman for the families of the affected girls. Discipline must be meted out, he told the board, and the appropriate discipline in this case was expulsion. Yes. Let's go. Kick that kid out of school. Let's go. He don't need no education. Send him out to the nation. Make him work at Burger King for the rest of his life. He raised a warning finger. And one last thing, I'm going to say this one time. I'm going to say it real slow. If we don't get the right decision here, may God have mercy on this city. Okay, they're being a bit, they're doing a bit much. May God, this is not. You're not burning a witch at Salem now. May God have mercy on our souls. This is insane. All right. At this point, the school's top administrators already seem to have lost interest in sorting through the levels of culpability among the account's different followers, likers, and commenters. Some students who followed the account at first received 2 days suspension, but those soon increased to the maximum suspension allowed under state regulations, 5 days, regardless of how much he or she interacted with the account. That decision would end up having lasting repercussions both for the students and the school district. Because most of the followers received the same punishment, it was easy for teachers, students, and parents to conclude that everyone had been involved to the same extent. According to subsequent lawsuits, school officials soon began referring to the account followers collectively as the harmers. The day after the school board meeting, A stood on the floor of the high school gymnasium in gray leggings and a green army jacket, holding a microphone in one hand and her phone in the other. Students in the bleachers leaned forward, straining to hear her trembling voice. It was the school's annual diversity assembly, and A was reading something she had written called "I Will Not Stand." She described a young boy of color who had come into the ice cream parlor where she worked and whose mother had asked if Albany High School would be a good place for him. She noted how sad she felt when she realized she couldn't answer in the affirmative. "So I will not stand for it," she said. "I will not stand for feeling unsafe in your own school. I will not stand for being shamed for something so strong and beautiful. I will not stand for being belittled and beat down. I will not stand for people trying to shove me into the perfect little stereotype." Shout out to this sister. Beautiful sister right here. Once again, black people continue to show no matter how undignified, un, uncivilized the white supremacists and their cohorts act, we continue to be excellent, and in all ways, they try to tear us down, they try to break us up, they try to demean us, they try to hurt our souls and our spirits. They can compare us to animals and say negative slurs about us all day, but yet and still, in the words of Maya Angelou, we rise, we come out like rose in concrete. Every single time. We are an excellent people. We are a chosen people. And we continue to show that in our ways. Let's continue here. After she uttered the final "I will not stand" in her list, she sat down cross-legged on the gym floor. By the end of the assembly, most of the students in the bleachers were on the gym floor too, called down by a student speaker who asked for a show of solidarity. By now, Charles was facing expulsion, as was one of his close friends, a Chinese-American account follower whose racist comments on the post indicated a higher level of involvement than the others. That second expulsion was later blocked by a judge. A third student, the one who touched A's hair, had agreed to go on independent study for the rest of the year, but the others were returning to school, and as their suspensions drew to a close, administrators found themselves confronting another problem. Somehow the kids who followed the account and the black girls who were affected by it were going to have to go to school together. Nuh-uh. No, they should not. No, they absolutely should not. These students who are a part of the harmers, they should be banned from Albany, exiled from Albany, and may God have mercy on your souls. Let's have that same energy for white supremacists, like the same way y'all have energy for young black boys like me who got suspended from school for not doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Ain't nobody stand up for me. Ain't nobody stand up for my First Amendment rights. When a racist teacher said, "Simon, you better stand for the national anthem," I told the girl I wanted to get some water. And she said, "No, you will go home." Anyway, I'll continue here. Eventually, school administrators hit upon a plan. A local nonprofit called Seeds, Services that Encourage Effective Dialogue and Solutions, would hold a mediation session between the two groups of students on the day the 11 followers, likers, and commenters were due to return to school. The mediation was optional, but the 11 followers agreed to attend. Their motivations and expectations varied. Some wanted a chance to apologize to the girls in person or to deliver the apology letters they had written. Others just wanted to get back to school. I was kind of looking forward to this in a weird sense, Doe says, because I thought this was going to be an opportunity to explain myself. He had spent days trying to understand why he hadn't said something when he first saw the account. Various explanations presented themselves. themselves. He had thought of himself as a peripheral, a sophomore eavesdropping on conversations among a group of juniors. If someone was going to say something, shouldn't it be someone inside the group? But what if those circumstances made him more responsible instead of less so? What if the fact that he didn't really know the account creator made him uniquely qualified to blow the whistle on the whole thing? Or at least to separate himself from the situation. Why was he thinking it over only now? I felt like I had a lot of opportunities to unfollow this account that I didn't take, he says. The day before the mediation session, someone associated with the Albany High School Feminist Club, only in California do you have an Albany High School Feminist Club. only in California. All right, they sent out a text about a protest planned by two other student clubs, the Black Student Union and the school's chapter of Amnesty International. This school is what type of school has a chapter of Amnesty International in high school? Even in my Louisiana is so bad. My university didn't have a chapter of Amnesty International. These man, what the with all these clubs going on at school, how do you have time to be racist? How do you have time to be racist when you can join the high school feminist club and definitely score? How do you have time to not join Amnesty International chapter of your high school and definitely score? How do you have all these opportunities here and you're hanging out with your 12 little buddies being incels, being racist against all these bad mixed broads in California? Oh God. God put me in Louisiana to make sure that I would not become a teenage father who was the leader of Amnesty International at my California high school. God knew what he did. God, I trust you, God. God, thank you for protecting me and my seeds and not letting me get in trouble in California. See, he knew what he was doing because this is insane. All right, the protest would coincide with the suspended students' return to school and begin at the mid-morning break with a sit-in in the main lobby. Please share this with basically anyone you know who also believes these harmers should not be let back into school, the text instructed. The message was forwarded from person to person, eventually reaching the harmers themselves. School administrators got wind of the protest too, but they decided to go forward with the mediation, which would be held in the same building where the protest was planned. Room 104 is a classroom big enough for a couple of saggy couches and an oversized armchair pushed up against the windows. On the day of the mediation, the 11 Instagram followers sat in red-seated chair desks on the side of the room closer to the door. The targets and a group of them supporters the targets and a group of their supporters sat across from them. The moderators sat at either end. The girls had been in high spirits before the session began, snapping photos buoyed by both jitters and hopefulness. But now the tension in the room was palpable. I could feel the angry, anxious, nervous energy everyone was feeling, Anna remembers. According to a timeline created by Seeds and later filed in court, the moderators started with what was supposed to be a neutral, low-impact question. Something like, what are some of the things you really like about Albany High School? They passed a rock around the room to signal each other's chance to reply. The part went well enough, although a number of the girls on the targeted side of the room opted to pass the rock along without speaking. Then the moderators asked the people who had been affected by the account to talk about how they felt when it was discovered and how they had been impacted since. A recalls saying that her sisters had asked her why she was so sad all the time. I shouldn't have to tell them, and I shouldn't have to tell an 8-year-old that I'm being bullied and I can't feel good about myself, she said. I shouldn't have to say that. The girls cried. Some of them yelled. They explained how deeply betrayed they felt, and everyone had a chance to speak. The Instagram group was asked to respond. That's when things began to go terribly, horribly wrong. I can't believe they thought this was a good idea. So people who are the victims of racism get to sit in the same room with people who did it, and then the people who did the racist actions towards these young black girls and Asian girls, presumably, because it's California, everybody's mixed. They then get to try explaining themselves. Hey, guys, we didn't mean to be racist. We were just trying to be funny. Oh, God, this is bad. This is bad. This is bad. Okay, the first problem was that the main culprits weren't in the room. The mediation was for students who were returning to classes, so the 3 students who were considered most culpable hadn't been invited. The 11 followers who came to the mediation kept wanting to explain the limits of their involvement, to point out that they weren't the ones who had actually made the posts. One boy had only just started following the account. Another hardly ever went on Instagram and said he had never interacted with the account. A couple of others said they had liked the post without really taking in the contents. It wasn't me, they each wanted to say. I'm not the one who did this. I'm not a racist. See, nothing is more annoying to black people when people say, you know what, I saw some racism, I participated in some racism, but it's really not me, it's the other person, it's the other group, it's not us, it's them. You know, you shouldn't be focused on racism, you should be focused on something else. Nothing is more annoying than that. Overall, this was a bad idea. This was a bad idea. What they should have done instead was had a workshop where they just sit down and watch Simon Hill Keeps It Real videos all day, because this is a better education for young folks to learn about anti-black racism and what we can do to fight it than passing rocks around the room and having white folks explain why they're not racist, because they're not the ones responsible for creating racism, apparently. Whatever. All right, but the distinctions that felt so important to the account followers meant little to the people who had been targeted. Who cared which one of them drew the noose or compared A to a gorilla? The point was that the people in that room had seen those things and had given them their approval, whether overt or implied. I really thought they would own up to what they did and, kind of apologize. A later told a news crew that covered the sit-in, and a lot of it was them defending themselves and constantly saying, well, I didn't really add to it by liking and commenting. I didn't really think I was part of it. And none of them were like, I'm so sorry. I'm taking full responsibility. I hate what I did. I don't agree with it. I didn't hear that. According to interviews with people who were there, the individual responses of the account followers varied significantly. Some were remorseful and contrite. Others were cocky or disengaged. All were desperately uncomfortable. Many wouldn't look up or meet the eyes of the accusers. The more emotional the targeted girls and their friends were, the more some of the followers focused on their own level of culpability rather than on the pain and hurt in front of them. Bro, chill is how A characterizes their attitude. Why are you taking it so seriously? It's just, us comparing black people to gorillas and drawing nooses on Instagram. I don't know why you're taking it so seriously. I'm surprised nobody mentioned hip hop yet. Every time we talk about racism, white folks have to shoe in hip hop some way. Because apparently, talking about lynching black people and comparing black people to gorillas is something that rappers have been doing. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've just made that up. That's absolutely not what rappers have been doing. But apparently, white people always have to mention hip hop. But I'm very glad. I'm very glad nobody's brought that up so far. Because, there's no way to talk about racism in America without white people demonizing black people in some way. So they always have to bring that up. I'm going to continue here. It would have been different if they had been able to talk one-on-one, says Murphy, the boy who initially showed the account to the girls. Then he wouldn't have been so worried about what his male friends thought of him. I think it's because we're guys, Murphy says, where it's like we don't want to show weakness almost. As the morning wore on, Carrie felt as if she were part of a collective panic attack. The emotions that had been building inside her since the day she stood in the bathroom, photographing the post with Rosie, now burst out of her mouth in a kind of howl. I thought I knew you guys, she remembers yelling. I was going to go to prom with you. Well, gotta find another prom date. All right, by 11 a.m., a couple of hundred student protests, most of them in the upper grades, had gathered on the floor of the main building, just yards from room 104, where the mediation session was still underway. They sat cross-legged on the red and white checked floor, taking up every inch of space. More protests had taken over the bright red staircase that led to the upper floors. Some held signs that said things like, I will not stand for racism, and we are the human race. It was silent, says one teacher, who requested anonymity because she feared retribution for talking to the press, and the expression on her faces was just fierce, like, you can't intimidate us. It was powerful. A few minutes earlier, Val Williams, the district superintendent, had sent out a community-wide email announcing that a rope that looked like a noose had been found hanging from a tree at a park next door to the high school. It turned out to be a rope swing, but by the time Williams sent out a correction about an hour later, tensions inside the mediation session, already at a peak, had reached a boiling point. The girls and their friends were certain the followers had hung the noose. Given what they'd seen on the account, it wasn't hard to believe. Some of the followers were infuriated by the accusation and skeptical that the noose was even real. Their dismissiveness further incensed the girls, some of whom stormed out of room 104. There, a few strides away, were the protesters. You guys need to see what we're what you've caused at the school, one of the targeted girls said when she returned to the room. It's time to get out in the hallway and stand in front of that crowd so everyone can see your faces. Yes, I'm all about it. Public shaming. Publicly shame the racists. Yes, I don't even care that they just, double tapped a post where people are getting hanged, or I don't care that you barely looked on Instagram and stuff like that. We want blood. We want blood. We want to see these people's faces. Yes, let's point out the racists. Let's do it. In declarations filed in court, school administrators say that the roughly 250 students at the sit-in remained quiet and respectful when the account followers came out of the room. Others who were there, students, parents, and staff, say that the protesters didn't stay completely silent for long. Ned Purdon, then an English and journalism teacher at the school, recalls hearing a rumble move through the crowd as the perpetrators came out. For a few seconds, it was very quiet, he says. Just this silent standoff, he adds. Then the shouting started. Everyone was hurling insults at us, Murphy says. Everyone was just bashing on us. As John Doe stood in front of everyone, his body buzzed with adrenaline, but his mind was utterly blank. He kept asking himself, is this really happening right now? I was just completely shut off, very disassociated, detached from the whole thing, because it didn't feel real, he recalls. That's easily the most surreal experience I've had in my life, because these are all people that I've known forever, some since kindergarten, people that I thought knew me, that I thought I knew. His teachers were there, even his friends. Later, these friends would tell him that they had tried to go to class, but he had been told by their instructors to attend the protest instead. And adding to the weirdness of the moment, his mother had arrived. She had come to school to pick him up at the end of the mediation and had witnessed the whole thing. She pushed through the crowd until she stood between her son and the protesters with her arms thrown wide as if to shield him with her body. You're the bullies, she told the crowd. I don't know, man. I know every mama has a duty to protect their children, but if your son just got exposed as an anti-black racist, you better push him in front of that crowd. You better say, do what you go ahead now. Say them lynching jokes in front of everybody now. That's how black mamas would do it. I mean, white mamas are different. White mamas would be like, I love my baby. He ain't no racist. Black mamas would be like, get your racist ass out there, boy. It's just different. It's just different. Anyway, as if to shield him with her body. You're the bully, she told the crowd. I wish I could be there for that. That's a meme. All right. Later, Doe would feel grateful to his mom for sticking up for him. But in that moment, his only thought was, this is my mom in front of the whole school, embarrassing me. Get them out of here, she yelled to the teachers and administrators who were watching the scene unfold. This isn't safe. Then one of the affected girls was on her feet yelling at Doe's mother. Shut up, bitch. Ah, got him. That's right. That's right. Call a bitch a bitch. Yes. So if you're defending a racist, even if it's your son, come on now. Come on now. You deserve that. You deserve that little B-bomb. You deserved it. You don't deserve to be called that over and over again, but you deserve at least one good B-bomb. All right. You don't know what you're talking about. Racism is not the same as getting yelled at, okay? Okay, these girls are turned. They turned up. Okay. You hung that noose, somebody yelled. Whose mom are you? Just as things seemed ready to spin even further out of control, the followers were hustled back into room 104. By early afternoon, somewhere between 300 and 700 students were out of class. The bulk were at the sit-ins, but a sizable number were milling around in groups, intoxicated by the intense emotions of the day and the sudden absence of restrictions. Outside, the news vans were lined up in front of the school. A news helicopter circled overhead. Most of the people targeted by the account had joined the protest along with their friends. After an administrator told them that they had to clear a path so as not to create a fire hazard, the protesting students had moved outside. They sat on either side of a long strip of pavement that extended from the school steps to the curb. The Instagram followers were meant to walk this gauntlet, which was being described as a walk of shame. The protesters insisted no harm would come to them if they did. They just wanted the account followers to see how hurt they were. They told the school administration, I do not disagree with any of this. I think this should be done every single time somebody is exposed for being racist online. Absolutely. If you're I think, anybody who posts online all day the N word, anti black racist slurs and stuff like that, and then we find out your IP, we find out your identity, I think you should have to walk in the middle of a crowd. No, you should have to walk through the middle of Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Baltimore, the blackest parts of Miami with your little racist memes on full display, tattooed to your forehead, and you have to tell everybody, hey, read what I wrote and expect a punch, and nobody can call the police in your defense. That's what I think. This is what needs to happen to anti-black racists, in my opinion. So, the parents of the account followers were trying to figure out another way to get their kids out of the school. Some of them, including Doe's mother, had been sequestered in a storeroom for hours while school administrators tried to determine their next move. Student protesters were looking in or banging on the window of both the storeroom and a conference room to which the account followers had been moved after the collapse of the mediation. At 2:22 p.m., the Albany Police Department was contacted by an unidentified caller who then handed the phone to the school's principal, Jeff Anderson, who is white. Anderson wanted to report a disturbance at the school and said they needed some support. School officials told the police that they were concerned about how to get the Instagram followers out of the school safely, according to a police department report. All available APD resources were immediately deployed to the area around the high school, including some officers who had been scheduled to attend a training outside the city. A nearby intersection was blocked off. Absolutely insane. These police were showing up to protect these kids who followed the Instagram account faster than the police who broke into Uvalde to save the kids who were getting shot up by a school shooter. Oh, wait, no. They showed up faster than that. We all saw the Uvalde video when the police were just waiting outside as they heard gunshots and literally kids were being killed in the classroom, and the Uvalde cops are around there like, so who's going to go first? Meanwhile, in California, 5 states away from Texas to California, we got the whole police department showing up like, stat, somebody call Bruce Willis. We got to break these kids out of school. They're being harassed by the woke mob. Only in America. We're the greatest nation of all time. Greatest nation in the world. This is insane. All right. The police recommendation was for 2 plainclothes officers who were already on campus to escort the involved students outside via the back exit. A complicated route that involved crossing a courtyard, then going through the lobby of the school gym to reach the sidewalk. 2 marked patrol cars would be waiting for them. At around 2:50 p.m., a physical education teacher arrived to accompany the Instagram followers alongside the 2 plainclothes detectives. When they got the signal, the students in the conference room shot across the hall to meet up with the parents who had been waiting in the storeroom and slip out through the back door into the courtyard. Then everyone just ran. This is mayhem. This is pandemonium. We're just chasing down racists in the school. 2 plainclothes cops. Who do we have? We have Matt Damon and we have Denzel Washington in their buddy cop movie called what's it called? Finstagram Escape. The Last Like. This is insane. Only in America can stories like this happen. This is absolutely retarded. This is parents and students are walking like the zombies in Walking Dead, chasing down the last 2 remaining racists in the world while Denzel Washington and Matt Damon hold down the fort. Only in America. This is just insane. All right. Outside, the protesters were still waiting for the Instagram followers to walk the gauntlet. Then someone shouted from inside the building, "They're going out the back." By the time the Instagram followers and their parents reached the gym lobby, a large crowd of students had gathered outside, phones out, filming, yelling. An empty water bottle flew through the air and struck one of the mothers on the head. As the Instagram followers remember it, their police escorts drifted out of sight. It was too crowded to run, so the account followers had to shuffle single file. Suddenly, Murphy felt a sharp tug on his back. The PE teacher had his hand on Murphy's backpack to keep him from getting sucked into the crowd, and he had been pulled backward himself. The next thing Murphy knew, someone had flipped him around and was punching him in the face. Oh, no. The blows broke his nose. Blood gushed onto his shirt and his white Vans, pulling on the ground. Another account follower was also hit. Oh, no. The horde got them. The woke mob is killing the last racist alive. Matt Damon saved the day. Denzel equalized something. Do something. Doe and the other sophomores and their parents made it to a minivan driven by his father. I can imagine that the minivan pulled up just like in Fast and the Furious, slides open. Vin Diesel says, "Get in now." Arnold Schwarzenegger's on the wheels. You're going to get to the chopper. This is amazing. This is better than Expendables 2. Uh, Doe and the other sophomores had their parents made it to a minivan driven by his father, but the van was soon surrounded by students. "We're trapped," one of the parents recalls. "We can't move. We can't drive." They start shaking the car, pushing the car, and we're all sort of bouncing around inside. "And I don't understand what the hell is happening," the parents say. "I don't know how to describe how terrifying it was." Is this a South Park episode? This literally sounds like something Trey Parker wrote. Uh, the first lawsuit was filed a month later by four of the Instagram followers and their parents. Named as defendants were both the Albany Unified School District and Superintendent Val Williams, the principal Jeff Anderson, and Melissa Fole. The lawsuit argued that both the Instagram posts themselves and the likes and comments were expressive or political speech, which is protected by the First Amendment, and that because YoungCavage was a private account created and interacted with outside school, the school district had no authority to punish the students for engaging with it. The students who had participated in the mediation session also argued that the school had placed them in harm's way with reckless indifference during the sit-in by riling up the crowd with the erroneous email about the noose and by failing to find them a safe way to leave the school. The second lawsuit came a little over a week later, filed on behalf of three sophomores and another account follower who hadn't interacted with any of the posts. The second suit included a slightly different First Amendment argument. The district might have the right to discipline students because of hateful speech, but liking a post and following an account were not hateful in and of themselves, and thus were constitutionally protected. But free speech issues were not the primary focus. Instead, the lawsuit argued that by exposing their identities and treating them as if they were responsible for the creation of the account, the district had made it impossible for these minimally involved students to safely return to school, thus depriving them of their right to education. By the end of June, Murphy and Charles would each file lawsuits of their own on free speech and other grounds, bringing the total of litigating students to 10. Almost as soon as the first lawsuits were filed, the parents of the account's targets began investigating whether they could sue the parents of the account followers. Most of the firms they approached weren't interested in the case, perhaps because the families they wanted to sue didn't have this kind of deep pockets the school district had. A's mother, though, eventually found a lawyer who would take A's case, Elizabeth Riles, a black woman who specialized in workplace discrimination and personal injury. All right, nothing against personal injury lawyers, but it sounds like Elizabeth just needed work. She needed a contract. Anyway, but A wasn't interested in investing more of her time and energy thinking about the incident. She just wanted the whole thing to go away. Fewer than half of the Instagram followers had ever returned to school after the failed mediation session, but running into those who had was a source of daily tension. Just working on not being fazed by them being there was hard, she says. The followers had been punished as much as they could be, yet the impact of the account lingered. At school, she felt scrutinized both for being black and also for being victimized. People that I didn't talk to would be way too nice to me or just kind of assume that I was like some type of like politically correct bomb that was about to go off and correct you, she says. Often she stayed home. Her mother worried about the way her once fearless child seemed to have lost the ability to climb out of bed in the morning. She gave a Chihuahua puppy to lift her spirits, but that too was a challenge. A made a point of walking the dog during school hours when she knew she wouldn't run into any of her peers. I didn't want to go outside, she recalls. I didn't want people to see me. Over the course of the following school year, A's mother kept bringing up the prospect of a lawsuit. With the 1-year anniversary of the account's discovery coming up, they were running out of time to sue. You'll have no options after that. A remembers her mother telling her, you're limiting a plethora of opportunities for yourself if you don't do anything. The word limiting hit hard because A did feel limited. She was a senior now and hadn't applied to any 4-year colleges. But some of those followers were going to college, weren't they? They were going to go on with their lives. I already felt limited in certain aspects by my social class, she says. She's decided to go ahead with the lawsuit. In March 2018, Elizabeth Riles filed a complaint with Alameda County Elizabeth Rouse filed a complaint in Alameda County Superior Court against Charles and the two other boys who were considered most responsible, along with their parents, for violation of A's civil rights, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, and invasion of privacy. One of the boys was also accused of battery for touching A's hair. A month later, the school district settled with 7 of the 10 Instagram followers who had sued. For 4 of those students, the settlements to be paid by the school's to be paid by the district's insurance were meant to cover any medical costs, counseling and moving expenses, or private school tuition. 3 boys who had returned to the high school each received $80,000 cash settlements. Man, maybe it pays to be racist. Maybe it pays to be racist. $80,000 cash, of course. $80,000 cash settlements after the court found that the district had violated their First Amendment rights because they had never indicated any approval via a like or comment of the post that targeted individual students. At a school board meeting soon after, parents of some of the targeted girls took to the microphone, huddled together at the lectern. A's mother wore a black leather jacket over a striped turtleneck, her long blonde hair spread over her shoulders, and her arms folded across her chest. "How could you not have even said no?" she demanded tearfully. "What you have done has been like putting salt in a wound, and our girls still have to go to school because they want to graduate. They have to go to school and hear these boys talk about how they're going to have a victory party." Absolutely terrible. Absolutely a shame. So slowly, the last of the lawsuits made their way through the courts. By the fall of 2020, there were just 2 people suing the district, one of whom was Charles. The same 2 were also among the last remaining defendants in A's lawsuit. Charles sat for deposition after deposition, not really clear about which case he was being interviewed for. "I definitely objectively think, okay, I'm in the wrong," said, and his classmate was in the right, he told me. "She didn't really do anything wrong." Even so, he allowed the lawsuits to keep going, fighting on 2 fronts, as plaintiff and as defendant. A trial date for A's lawsuit was set for the end of November. 3 years and 8 months had passed since the account was first discovered, but many of the students on both sides of the story were still struggling to get on with their lives. The pandemic shutdown intensified the feeling that they were stuck in an endless loop. A described her life as purgatory and fantasized about having the resources to leave town. John Doe had continued the soul-searching discovery that began after the account's discovery. By his sophomore year in college, he found that he was grateful for the way the experience had changed him. He was more serious now that he'd been as a 15-year-old social butterfly, plagued by both anxiety and depression. Still, he thought he had gained more than he had lost. "Had I just continued that trajectory at Albany, how I would be as a person, I think I would be worse off," he says. "I would probably be less introspective, less critical. I would think less, because I question things now in a way that I don't think I could have before had I not gone through the experience like this." Charles wasn't quite as resolved. He wanted to settle A's case, but he was having trouble coming to terms with the fact that he would have to hand over his own money. Funds were tight. He was still working a retail job, still going to community college. He hadn't gotten anything from his own lawsuit, which his lawyer continued to appeal. "It's hard," he says. "It's not like I don't want them to get something out of it. It's just I don't want them to take it from me." On November 30th, 2020, the day the trial was scheduled to begin, Elizabeth Rouse told the judge that a settlement had been reached. Rouse would not confirm the amount, but Charles remembers agreeing to pay $15,000 combined with settlements from the other defendants, some of them confidential. The amount going to A was meaningful, even if it wasn't quite as much as the $80,000 awarded to some of the account followers. Now that's a shame. The victim gets $15,000. Meanwhile, the people who were following the account, who got a little bit harassed at school, get $80,000, and most of them are white. White supremacy in play. Afterwards, she sounded more relieved than jubilant. "I'm very glad that this chapter is over in my life," she says. Now she had a little money, a little freedom. "I've been battling with myself about whether I should play it safe or travel and take bigger leaps that have been presenting themselves to me," she said. "This is just kind of affirming to me that I should keep taking leaps because it's working." Shortly afterwards, she moved to the highlands of Guatemala to study meditation, metaphysics, and yoga at a retreat center by Lake Atitlan. She had been traveling the world ever since. Well, shout out to her. It's good that Black people travel. Uh, Charles's lawsuit kept going, his lawyer appealing to a higher court with every loss until finally, this June, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the last appeal. Darren McNally, who is now the principal of Albany High School, has a bald pate, a bushy reddish beard, and an implacable demeanor that belies his interest in the emotional lives of his students and their families. In 2017, when the YoungCavage account was discovered, he was a first-year administrator. Today, most of the students involved are 23, around the age he was when he first started teaching. When he thinks about them, which is often, he thinks about the importance of teaching empathy and interpersonal connection, of helping students connect the dots between the more abstract lessons about injustice they receive in the classroom and the immediate impacts of their own actions on the human beings sitting in the desks next to them. These kids had been instructed that these things are bad on an intellectual level, he said, referring to the racism and sexism of the YoungCavage account, but not on a deeper interpersonal and emotional level. And so they knew it would be transgressive. It would be edgy to do this, but didn't understand the harm that could come from it. Schools can bridge the gap, McNally suggests, by building a capacity for reflection among young people who may not be in the habit of thinking deeply about their own or other people's emotions. But doing so requires moving beyond the conventional calculations of school discipline, in which the menu of responses to bullying or hate speech is limited to three choices: ignore, suspend, or expel. When the Albany community demanded the harshest possible retribution, it was in part because few people could imagine an alternative that didn't amount to shrugging it off or sweeping it under the rug. We live in a society that is so punishment focused, that is so focused on turning people into right and wrong and then punishing wrongness, that it's incredibly difficult to get people out of that mindset, he says. It makes me think about how we as a society have actually trained everybody that exclusion is what you do to people that are not right. Well, we should exclude racists. We should exclude white supremacists. We should exclude bigots. I agree with that. Let's ostracize them as much as possible, because what they do is ostracize the innocent. They ostracize people that they don't like or that they view as inferior. Anyway, like McNally, Melissa Fole has found herself in a contemplative frame of mind since the resolution of the lawsuit. Back in 2017, she interviewed every student she knew was involved on both sides of the account. Each of their stories was different. Many were heartbreaking. It is those overlooked peculiarities it is those overlooked particularities that she mourns now, the complexities that were lost in the rush to respond to the community's desire for immediate action and stern retribution. Back then, it felt as if she were in the middle of a conflagration. Back then, it felt as if she were in the middle of a conflagration. Say that word 5 times fast. It was a fire line, she says. And so everybody was passing the buckets. Her eyes filled with tears at the recollection. Some of us, me included, accidentally picked up some gas. We didn't know it, right? We were just passing the bucket, and I'm sorry that it was gasoline. I didn't mean to do any harm. I tried to pick up plenty of buckets of water, but when it's all moving so quickly like that, it all looks the same. This was a very, very, very dope story. Shout out to Dashka Slater. She's a writer in California with a focus on teenagers and criminal justice. Check out her book, The 57 Bus. Very, very dope story. I really liked it. I think the moral in all of this is that racism for young people, young black students, is a very big problem and has lasting effects, and we need to take it seriously when it happens in education. The perpetrators of racism in school need to be severely punished. We need to show young black people that there is a way to fight back against racism in a constructive way. Because the worst thing that could have happened is that these perpetrators go unpunished. People just brush it off their shoulders as kids being kids. And meanwhile, this anger and resentment builds in these young black people, and then they take it out on themselves or the world later. Shout out to the sister who dealt with all of that, and all the other young people here who were victims of these racist perpetrators. And I hope you found this video very interesting and engaging. I sure did. Check out other content on my channel. New videos dropping soon. Always. And on Simon Hill Keeps It Trill, we're going to continue to push our line.